Unfortunately, I'm going to sound like a broken record. That is exactly the way all of the candidates have stated it. That's exactly the issue. You know, I am not seeking endorsements. I'm very independent, but you know what? I have family, I have friends, and it is going to, that's the difficult part that we're going to be dealing with. They come before me, I cannot be there in front of them as their judge. And those are issues that we deal with. And as a judge, we have to leave all of that outside the doors, and we have to make a decision based on what's in front of us. And I think all the candidates here feel that way, and we all know that that's part of this job. And unfortunately, it's up to you to make the decision as to who that person should be up there on that bench making that decision. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think we're getting to that time where we'd like to allow enough time for people to ask questions if they have some out in the audience, if you're ready for it. So for those who are interested in hearing some feedback from judges on particular questions, do we have a roaming mic? Okay. Do we have people that can deliver that mic? All right. Raise your hand if you would like to make a comment or ask a question of a judge or multiple judges on the panel. And please state your name first before you ask your question. Thanks.
George Asherle. I have a question which is directed primarily to the circuit court candidates, but there's obviously tremendous spillover into the district court. I've been a physician for 40 years. 30 of those years have been right here in mid-Michigan. And every day I deal with broken human beings, emotionally and physically broken. And much of what I see is impacted upon or exacerbated by what in our lifetime has become the greatest scourge or affliction in our society, and that is the broken family. And the family, of course, is the basic unit of society. It wasn't too long ago that Michigan enacted a law that was concurrently enacted by many other states, no-fault divorce. Prior to that time, when a man and a woman decided to get married, they took a vow, and the vow was for better or for worse, for richer or for poorer, in sickness or in health, until death. And as we all know, anyone who's been around, life is a minefield. It's wading through a lot of quicksand. There are lots of trials and tribulations. And in an era gone by, people who took that vow got through those trials and tribulations, and they did so very effectively. But when the no-fault divorce law was enacted, and I believe it was contrived, it spawned what in this country has become a multi-billion-dollar divorce custody industry, in which many unscrupulous and predominantly plaintiffs' divorce attorneys make a pretty good sum. And even more, sadly, a whole slew of so-called counselors make a...
Sir, not to cut you off, but can you actually get to the question?
The point is, I want to know what the circuit court judges propose. Now, Mr. Nichols already alluded to it, but I want to know, what does he propose that he, as a circuit court judge, can do? Because obviously this multi-billion-dollar business is exacerbated by, or could be curtailed by, the circuit court judge.
Okay. So do I hear in your
Yes.
question in terms of
Yes.
how would you like Mr. Gill and Mr. Nichols to respond to the idea
Yes,
of how to deal with
I would like to know what they would propose could be done to reform the system. Mr. Nichols already mentioned it.
Okay.
Many key people in the friend of the court system have told me over the years that this is an issue that does not belong in the court system.
I see. Okay, so let's give Mr. Gill or Mr. Nichols a chance to respond. Yes, go ahead.
the law in Michigan does allow no-fault divorce, and that's been true since just before I began to practice. But to say that that's the cause of the breakdown in the family, I think is a great oversimplification. Because although I didn't practice before the no-fault insurance law, the no-fault divorce law came into being, I do know lawyers who did, and of course I've read a lot about it, and divorces were obtained in those days. Sometimes there was arduous litigation trying to prove that somebody did this or somebody did that. That would have been the boon for the lawyers because those all required trials if they were contested. Ultimately, a divorce is going to happen if one of two parties decides they don't want to be married, and the court can't stop that. And the legislature might put obstacles up in front of it. But the issue goes much beyond that. Breakdowns in families beget breakdowns in families. There has been, we have in our culture, a deterioration in family life that's caused by a multitude of different reasons, all of which need to be dealt with. What the courts can do is try to have a friend of the court system that's as efficient as possible, can make services available for counseling, but ultimately the courts are not going to stop divorces, and the courts are not going to stop the breakdown in families. What's going to be required is that people who start families take responsibility for themselves and for their families, and that's really a societal issue that goes well beyond the courts.
Thank you.
Sir, you are very right. It's way too easy to get a divorce. There are cases where it's needed, unfortunately. There are breakdowns in relationships, major breakdowns in relationships. I see it all the time. I see abusive relationships. I see relationships where people feel they're trapped. I just had a divorce of people that were married for almost 50 years, and they ended up finally, she couldn't handle it anymore, a very, very abusive relationship. The law allows that opportunity. Unfortunately, you also see the easy out, the scapegoat. Well, you know, I don't feel like being responsible, so I'm going to just get a divorce. That's wrong. That's not right. Yeah, we need to have some things implemented. What do we need implemented? Well, first of all, a lot of those involve children. A lot of the marriages that those breakdowns occur, usually it's because, and it's not usually, but it does happen, it's because they have a child involved, and let's get married because that's the right thing to do. The problem is that poor child ends up being the scapegoat for both of them. They point fingers, and that poor child ends up being the problem rather than the reason to move on. What we need in this court system is we do need some counseling with people. We need some hurdles to jump over before that divorce can be finalized. We need to listen to both sides to determine what's best for that child when that child's involved, because that is our future. We're not going to help those two people that don't get along. They're going to fight like cats and dogs. That's going to be the way it is. But that child should not be involved in that. And then when they end up going off and trying to get into a relationship, they remember mom and dad fighting like cats and dogs. That must be what marriage is all about. That they don't need. And that's an area that I am really seriously focusing on in my, I'm saying that in my campaign, but when I get on the bench, that is absolutely, I want to implement some of these programs to take care of those issues. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.